The intelligence came from a captured Vrex warrior that had somehow survived neural disruption long enough to be studied. Deep in its organic memory systems, Dr. Jinho found coordinates, a location in deep space, far beyond the charted regions of the galaxy, where the pheromone signals originated from, the Swarm Queen. Admiral Sora studied the data in her ready room, the holographic display showing a star system that appeared on no coalition maps. According to the captured information, the Queen was a bioconstruct the size of a small moon, the mother and coordinator of every Vrex swarm in the galaxy. Destroy her and the entire species would collapse into chaos. It's a trap, Commander Diho said, standing across from her desk. Has to be. Why would they keep this information in individual warriors unless they wanted us to find it? Probably as a trap, Sora agreed. But it doesn't matter. We can't win a defensive war against an enemy with unlimited numbers. We need to cut off the head, even if it means walking into their jaws to do it. The Coalition Council won't authorize an offensive operation into uncharted space. Sora smiled without humor. The Coalition Council authorized genocide. They don't get to suddenly develop ethics when it's our lives on the line. She pulled up a fleet roster. I'm taking Strike Force Omega. 200 ships, our best crews. Every weapon we can pack into the holds. That's a one-way trip. Admiral. I know. Word spread through the Third Fleet within hours. Admiral Sora was planning a direct assault on the Vrex home system, and she was looking for volunteers. No one would be ordered to go. This was suicide mission, pure and simple. The odds of survival were effectively zero. 500 ships volunteered within the first hour. Sora had to turn most of them away. Strike Force Omega could only accommodate 200 vessels, and even that was pushing the logistics envelope. She chose carefully, selecting ships with the best combat records, crews with the most experience, commanders who understood that they were trading their lives for a chance to end the threat. Commander Daiho volunteered the Indomitable immediately. Lieutenant Bora and Reaper Squadron submitted their applications as a unit. Dr. Jinho insisted on coming along, arguing that his expertise might be crucial if they encountered unexpected Vrex variants. Captain Hyun, against all logic and his better judgment, volunteered to bring a coalition observer fleet. 10 ships, enough to document what happened and report back if the worst occurred. The preparations took 3 days. Ships were loaded with enough ammunition to fight a dozen major battles. Reactors were tuned to maximum efficiency. Crews ran constant drills preparing for scenarios that ranged from unlikely to impossible. On the 3rd day, Strike Force Omega departed. The journey took 2 weeks. They traveled through uncharted space, following the coordinates extracted from Vrex memory tissue. The regions they passed through were haunted. Dozens of dead systems, planets stripped of all biological matter, stars surrounded by debris that had once been thriving worlds. This is what the Vrex leave behind, Captain Hyun whispered, watching a dead world drift past on his view screen. Complete consumption. They found the Queen's system without difficulty. The Vrex made no attempt to hide it. Why would they? This deep in their territory, no enemy had ever penetrated. Until now. The system's star was a dim red giant, its light casting everything in shades of crimson. Orbiting the star was the Queen herself, a biological construct so massive that Hyun's mind struggled to comprehend the scale. She was easily the size of Earth's moon, a pulsing mass of organic tissue that spawned thousands of new Vrex every second. Surrounding the Queen was the largest Vrex military force the humans had ever encountered. Millions of bioships, billions of warriors, defensive platforms grown from organic matter that bristled with weapons. The entire system was a fortress dedicated to protecting the source of the swarm. Target acquired, Admiral Sora said calmly, as if she was discussing a training exercise rather than the most dangerous military operation in human history. All ships implement attack plan Ragnarok. Let's finish this. Strike Force Omega accelerated into the system. The Vrex responded immediately. The swarm moved as one. A tide of death that flowed toward the human ships with overwhelming numbers. But the humans had prepared for this. Every ship knew its role. Every captain understood the plan. Every crew member was ready to sacrifice everything. The battle that followed would be remembered as the single bloodiest engagement. In the history of space warfare, human dreadnoughts traded fire with Vrex bioships at ranges that turned space into a kill zone of energy beams and kinetic projectiles. Carriers launched waves of strike craft that carved through the enemy formations with desperate precision. Destroyers and frigates sacrificed themselves to create openings for the larger vessels. Lieutenant Bora flew Reaper 7 through hell itself. Her squadron had been reduced to 6 craft in the first hour of combat. She didn't have time to mourn the dead. She just kept flying, kept shooting, kept pushing deeper into the swarm. Reaper 1, this is Fleet Command. We need a path to the Queen cleared. Can you do it? Bora looked at her tactical display. Between her position and the Queen were approximately 10,000 Vrex warriors, 200 bioships, and enough defensive fire to vaporize a planet. Affirmative, Command. Give us 5 minutes. She switched to squadron frequency. Reaper Squadron, we're going to punch a hole straight through to that ugly thing in the center. Weapons free, no holds barred, and if anyone wants to say goodbye to their loved ones, now's the time. One of her pilots laughed. It was a sound without sanity. Already did that before we left, boss. Let's make it count. 6 strike craft against an army. The odds were so ridiculous that Bora felt something like joy. This was what they trained for. This was the moment that defined them. They dove into the swarm. Commander Deho's ship, the Indomitable, lost its entire starboard weapons array in the first 30 minutes of combat. They kept fighting. They lost main engines at the 40-minute mark. They used maneuvering thrusters to stay in the battle. When their ammunition ran low, they rammed Vrex bioships using the Indomitable's mass as a weapon. Commander, we've got a boarding team request from Dr. Jinho, his tactical officer reported. He wants to take a Marine unit and insert directly into the Queen's surface. Is he insane? Probably, sir. But he says he's found a weakness in the Queen's biology. If he can deliver the neural virus directly to her central nervous system, it'll spread through her entire body and kill her from the inside. Deho looked at the tactical situation. They were losing. Slowly, inevitably, the sheer weight of numbers was grinding them down. Every human ship was damaged, some barely functional. They'd come all this way, sacrificed so much, and they were still going to fail. Unless Dr. Jinho could do the impossible. Approved. Get him whatever he needs. Dr. Jinho stood in the Indomitable's hangar bay, wearing a combat pressure suit that looked ridiculous on his slim frame. Around him, 12 Marines checked their weapons with the calm focus of people who knew they were about to die. Thank you for volunteering, Jinho said quietly. The squad leader, a scarred veteran whose name tag read Park, just shrugged. Somebody's got to keep the scientists alive. Might as well be us. They boarded an assault shuttle, the small craft barely large enough to hold them all. The pilot, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 20, gave them a thumbs up. Hold on to something. This is going to be rough. Rough was an understatement. The shuttle launched from the Indomitable and immediately came under fire from every Vrex weapon in range. The pilot threw the craft through evasive maneuvers that would have killed everyone. Aboard if not for the inertial dampeners working. Over time, they crashed into the Queen's surface after 3 minutes of flight. That felt like hours. The Marines were out of their seats before the shuttle stopped sliding across the organic terrain. They established a perimeter while Jinho examined the Queen's tissue with his scanner. This way, he said, pointing toward what looked like a canyon of flesh. The central nervous system should be approximately 2 kilometers in. 2 kilometers through hostile alien biology, while the largest battle in history raged overhead. Simple. They moved fast, following Jinho's directions through passages that pulsed and breathed around them. The Queen's immune system recognized them as foreign objects and sent biological defenders. The Marines dealt with each threat efficiently, their weapons adapted specifically for this environment. Jinho tried not to think about what they were doing. He was walking through the body of a living creature, planning to poison it to death. The ethics were complicated, but the necessity was clear. If they failed here, the Vrex would continue consuming the galaxy until nothing remained. Contact front, Sergeant Park shouted. A massive Vrex warrior, bigger than any they'd encountered, emerged from a side passage. It was easily 4 meters tall, armored in biological plating that looked nearly impenetrable. The Marines opened fire. Their rounds bounced off the armor. The warrior charged, its mandibles reaching for the nearest Marine. Dr. Jinho acted without thinking. He grabbed a plasma torch from his equipment pack and threw it at the warrior. The device detonated on impact, superheated gases cutting through the armor that ballistic rounds couldn't penetrate. The warrior collapsed, dead. Nice throw, Doc, Park said, breathing hard. Fusion warheads detonated in carefully calculated patterns, each one designed to maximize destruction. The attacks continued. The medical bay of the Eternal Vigilance smelled like antiseptic and something else, something that Captain Hyun's translator didn't have words for. Pain, maybe, or determination. He walked through rows of beds where human wounded lay recovering from injuries that should have killed them. A young man, barely out of adolescence, had lost his entire left arm below the elbow. He was sitting up, laughing at something his friend in the next bed said. Another soldier had burns across 40% of her body. She was reviewing tactical reports on a data pad, her bandaged fingers moving slowly but steadily across the screen. 12,000 dead, 30,000 wounded. The numbers scrolled across displays throughout the fleet, updated in real time as medical teams processed the casualties from the Battle of Helix Prime. The humans called these losses acceptable. Captain Hyun, thank you for coming, a voice said behind him. He turned to find a human woman in a white coat, her dark hair pulled back and her eyes showing signs of exhaustion. Her name tag read Dr. Kang, Chief Medical Officer. I wanted to see, Hyun said quietly, to understand what you've sacrificed for us. Dr. Kang nodded, gesturing for him to follow. This way. I'll show you what sacrifice means to us. They walked through the medical bay, past beds filled with injured soldiers who should be screaming in agony, but instead were joking with each other, planning what they'd do when they recovered, asking when they could return to duty. The contrast with coalition wounded, who typically required psychological support teams and extended therapy, was stark. How do they handle it? Hyun asked. The pain, the trauma, the loss? Training, mostly. We teach our soldiers how to function through horror from day one. But there's more to it than that. Dr. Kang stopped at a bed where a young man lay sleeping, his vital signs displaying on the monitor above him. This is Ensign Taeyang, 22 years old, first combat deployment. He killed 37 Vrex warriors during a boarding action before his squad extracted him from a compromised section. A hero, then a traumatized kid who's going to have nightmares for the rest of his life. Dr. Kang's voice was gentle. We're not fearless, Captain. We're terrified most of the time. We just learn to keep functioning despite the fear. It's what our world demanded of us to survive. As if on cue, Ensign Taeyang's eyes snapped open. He gasped, his hands reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. The monitors screamed warnings as his heart rate spiked dangerously high. Dr. Kang was at his side instantly, her hand on his shoulder. Taeyang, you're safe. You're on the Eternal Vigilance. The battle is over. You're safe. It took several minutes for the young man to calm down, his breathing slowly returning to normal. When his eyes focused on Dr. Kang, they were filled with shame. I'm sorry, Doctor. I thought I was still... Don't apologize. Your reaction is completely normal. She checked his monitors, adjusting his medication slightly. You did your job. Now let us do ours. After Taeyang settled back into an uneasy sleep, Dr. Kang led Hyun out of the medical bay. In the corridor, she stopped and turned to face him directly. You wanted to understand sacrifice? That's what it looks like. We're not some race of perfect warriors who feel no pain and fear no death. We're just people who come from a world that taught us to hurt and keep moving, to break and keep fighting, to die and make it mean something. Hyun felt a wave of emotions he couldn't quite name. Guilt for asking humans to fight his battles, gratitude for their willingness to do so, fear of what it said about his own species that they couldn't match this level of commitment. The Coalition is convening an emergency session, he said quietly. About Dr. Jinho's weapon. Dr. Kang's expression hardened. The neural virus? Yes, it could end the Vrex threat permanently, but it would also constitute genocide under Coalition law. We've never had to make a decision like this before. Elsewhere on the ship, Dr. Jinho sat in his laboratory, surrounded by samples and data streams. The neural virus was complete. 3 days of intense work, analyzing Vrex biology, synthesizing the perfect chemical agent, and running simulations to ensure it would work. It would. The virus would spread through the Vrex pheromone network like wildfire, disrupting the neural pathways that allowed individual organisms to function. It wouldn't kill them outright, but it would reduce them to non-sentient biological matter, unable to coordinate, unable to breed, unable to continue their expansion across the galaxy. It was elegant. It was efficient. It was humane by certain definitions. It was also the complete extermination of a species. Ambassador Minji stood in the Coalition Council chamber, facing 7 elder counselors whose expressions ranged from horrified to desperate. Elder Counselor Vess spoke first, their crystalline body refracting the chamber's light into patterns that spoke of deep conflict. Ambassador, your forces have performed beyond our expectations, but the methods employed, the weapons used, the casual acceptance of casualties, all of this violates fundamental principles that the coalition was founded upon. Minji remained calm, her hands clasped behind her back. With respect, Counselor, your principles were formed in a galaxy without existential threats. The Vrex aren't a diplomatic problem. They can't be reasoned with, negotiated with, or contained through economic pressure. They're a species whose only purpose is to consume everything in their path. That doesn't give you the right to destroy them completely. No, Minji agreed. It gives you the right. We're just offering you the tool to do it. The chamber fell silent. Counselor Vess looked at each of their fellow counselors, reading their emotional states through subtle changes in posture and color. Finally, they spoke again. We need time to consider this. The ethical implications. With respect, you don't have time. Minji pulled up a tactical display showing the Vrex positions throughout the sector. Our intelligence indicates 3 more major swarms moving toward Coalition space. They'll arrive within 2 weeks. The 3rd Fleet can hold them off, maybe even push them back. But there are dozens more swarms behind those. Maybe hundreds. We don't know how far the Vrex territory extends. Then we evacuate. We fall back to defensible positions. And abandon billions of civilians? How many worlds are you willing to sacrifice while you debate ethics? Minji's voice hardened. This is the choice, counselors. Deploy the virus and end the threat, or watch the Vrex consume world after world while you maintain your moral superiority. Another counselor, a Deltharan whose fluid form shifted with agitation, spoke up. You make it sound so simple, but this is genocide. The complete extermination of a species. How can we authorize such an action and still call ourselves civilized? Admiral Sora's voice cut through the chamber from a holographic projection. She had been listening to the entire debate and her patience had clearly run out. Counselors, let me be very clear about something. We didn't come here because we love war. We came because you asked for help, and we're capable of providing it. But if you're going to waste time debating philosophy while people die, then you don't deserve our help. Admiral, that's uncalled for. Is it? Sora's eyes were cold. We've lost 12,000 personnel in less than a week. 12,000 men and women who will never see their families again, who died fighting to protect people they never met. And you're sitting in a comfortable chamber, debating whether it's ethical to use the weapon that would ensure their sacrifice meant something. She leaned forward, her expression intense. This is what help from Deathworlders looks like, counselors. We don't fight wars to feel good about ourselves. We fight to win because losing means extinction. If you can't stomach what survival requires, then you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in shocked silence. Captain Hyun, watching from the observation gallery, felt the weight of the decision pressing down on everyone present. The coalition had prided itself on being different from the violent species scattered throughout the galaxy. They had built a society based on cooperation, peaceful resolution, and respect for all life. Now they had to choose between their principles and their survival. Elder Counselor Vess spoke quietly, their voice carrying harmonics of resignation. Call a vote. All counselors, register your decision. Should we authorize the deployment of Dr. Jinho's neural virus against the Vrex? One by one, the counselors indicated their choices. Hyun watched the tally appear on the display, feeling sick regardless of the outcome. The vote passed. 4-3. The coalition had just authorized genocide. In his laboratory, Dr. Jinho received the authorization codes. He looked at the virus samples, each one capable of spreading through an entire swarm in hours. He thought about the Vrex, wondering if they had families, if they had culture, if they understood what was about to happen to them. Then he thought about the 12,000 human dead, about the millions of coalition civilians who would die if the Vrex weren't stopped, about the billions more who would suffer if the swarms continued their expansion. He began preparations for mass production of the virus. Sometimes, survival required monstrous choices. The humans had known that for their entire history. Now the coalition was learning it too. The Vrex attacked in their standard pattern, a massive wave of bioships and warrior organisms that had overwhelmed every coalition force they had encountered. 3 billion combat forms surged toward the human fleet, each one a killing machine evolved over countless generations for maximum efficiency. Captain Hyun watched from his position at Rally Point Gamma, his sensors tracking the engagement from a safe distance. He expected to see the human fleet adopt a defensive formation, maybe pull back to establish a firing line, employ the same tactics the coalition had tried and failed with dozens of times. Instead, the Third Fleet accelerated forward. "They're charging," his tactical officer said, disbelief clear in his voice. By the Founders, they're charging directly at the swarm. Admiral Sora's flagship, the Eternal Vigilance, led the advance. The massive dreadnought plowed into the Vrex formation like a blade, its weapons batteries opening fire at point-blank range. Energy beams carved through organic armor, railgun rounds punched through bioships, and missile salvos detonated in devastating clusters that vaporized hundreds of organisms at once. Behind the flagship, the rest of the fleet followed in a coordinated assault that made coalition naval tactics look like children playing with toys. Each ship knew exactly where it needed to be, exactly when to fire, exactly how to support its neighbors while maximizing damage to the enemy. Lieutenant Bora led Reaper Squadron through the chaos with aggressive precision. Her strike craft twisted and turned through the swarm, weapons firing in controlled bursts that never wasted a shot. A Vrex warrior the size of a bus lunged at her, bioplasma cannons glowing. She rolled her craft, fired thrusters, and put 3 armor-piercing rounds through what passed for the creature's brain. "Reaper 5, you've got 4 on your tail," she called out, tracking her wingman on sensors. "I see them." "Boss, handling it." Reaper 5's craft executed a maneuver that violated 3 different laws of physics, bleeding velocity in a way that should have torn the ship apart. The pursuing Vrex overshot, and Reaper 5 casually destroyed them all with a sustained burst from his rotary cannons. "Reaper Squadron, we've got target designation from Fleet Command," Bora announced, checking her tactical display. "Big one, coordinates transmitting now. They're calling it a coordinator organism. Command wants it dead 5 minutes ago." The target appeared on her sensors, a massive Vrex specimen that was 3 times the size of the standard warriors. It pulsed with bioluminescence, sending signals to the swarm around it. "Definitely a commander. Reaper 7, Reaper 9, you're with me. Everyone else cover our approach." 3 strike craft broke from the main formation and accelerated toward the coordinator. Vrex warriors swarmed to intercept, launching bioprojectiles and acid clouds that filled space with deadly obstacles. Bora's hands moved across her controls with practiced ease, plotting a course through the incoming fire that maximized speed while minimizing exposure. Her craft danced through the chaos, taking minor hits on the shields but nothing serious. Behind her, Reaper 7 and Reaper 9 followed her exact path, trusting her judgment completely. Weapons free in 3, 2, 1 mark. All 3 craft fired simultaneously. Nuclear-tipped missiles streaked toward the coordinator, their warheads set for maximum yield. The Vrex tried to intercept, but the missile's point defense systems destroyed anything that got close. The coordinator organism never had a chance. The nuclear detonations vaporized it and everything within a kilometer radius, leaving an expanding sphere of superheated plasma where the swarm's commander had been. Immediately, the Vrex around that sector became disorganized. Without the coordinator's pheromone signals, the warriors lost cohesion and began attacking randomly, sometimes even firing on each other. "Splash 1 coordinator," Bora reported, observing loss of enemy unit cohesion in this sector. "Confirmed, Reaper 1, Admiral Sora's voice came through on the command channel. "All strike groups, priority targeting on coordinator organisms. Let's turn this swarm into a mob." Across the battlefield, human pilots began hunting the larger Vrex specimens. Every coordinator that died created a pocket of chaos in the swarm's formation, and the humans exploited each opening ruthlessly. Commander Deho's ship, the Indomitable, pushed deep into the Vrex formation. His orders were simple: find a bioship, board it, and gather intelligence on Vrex biology. Simple didn't mean easy. "Target acquired," his tactical officer announced. "Bioship 12 kilometers long, heavily defended. Looks like a breeding vessel. Perfect. Helm ramming speed." The crew didn't question the order. They simply executed it. The Indomitable's engines roared to full power, pushing the heavy cruiser to velocities that made its hull groan with stress. Point defense systems fired constantly, clearing a path through the smaller Vrex organisms. The bioship tried to evade, its massive bulk turning with surprising speed. Too slow. The Indomitable struck it amidships with enough force to crack a moon. The collision drove the human ship deep into the organic structure, tearing through layers of armor and flesh until it lodged in the bioship's core. Boarding teams, go, go, go. Marines poured out of the Indomitable's assault bays, their powered armor making them look like demons from ancient mythology. They carried weapons that ranged from conventional firearms to plasma cutters to gravitational disruptors, and they used all of them. The Vreks inside the bioship fought back with desperate fury. Warriors the size of tanks charged through narrow corridors, their mandibles and claws tearing into anything they could reach. The Marines responded with overwhelming firepower and tactics refined through centuries of warfare. Contact front. 3 warriors, big ones, a squad leader shouted over the comm. Frag out! Grenades bounced down the corridor, detonating with precise timing that shredded the Vreks attackers. Before the smoke cleared, the Marines advanced, their rifles firing in controlled bursts that put rounds through alien armor with surgical precision. Dr. Jinho followed behind the combat teams, his medical scanner recording everything. He was a scientist, not a soldier, but he'd done enough field work to know how to stay alive in a combat zone. Besides, his Marine escort was very good at their job. I'm seeing nerve clusters here, he reported, examining a fallen Vreks warrior. Complex pheromone receptors, multiple redundant organs. These things are built to survive damage that would kill most species instantly. That's nice, Doc, his escort sergeant said, scanning the corridor ahead. Can we kill them or not? Oh, we can definitely kill them. I'm just trying to figure out how to do it more efficiently. Jinho took tissue samples, recorded neural patterns, and analyzed the chemical composition of the Vreks' biology. With each new piece of data, a picture emerged. These creatures were incredibly sophisticated, their bodies the result of millions of years of evolution in an environment that made Earth look gentle by comparison. But they had a weakness. The pheromones, Jinho said suddenly. They're not just communication. They're integration. These things are individual organisms, but they function like cells in a larger body. The coordinator organisms provide the signal that keeps them unified. So we keep killing the coordinators, the sergeant said. Or we disrupt the signal entirely. Jinho's mind raced through possibilities. If we could create a chemical agent that interfered with the pheromone receptors, we could break down the entire swarm's cohesion. Sounds like a job for the lab guys back on the ship. Exactly what I'm thinking. Outside, the battle continued to rage. The Third Fleet had fully committed to the engagement, and the Vreks were learning a harsh lesson. For every human ship they damaged, 10 more pressed the attack. For every warrior they killed, 100 more died to human weapons. Captain Hyun watched his display in stunned silence. The numbers were impossible, but he couldn't argue with the evidence. In 6 hours of sustained combat, the human fleet had destroyed more than 40% of the Vreks forces. The Coalition's best efforts over 3 months hadn't accomplished a fraction of that, and the humans were just getting started. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Sora, his communications officer said. Hyun accepted the call. Sora's face appeared on the holographic display, and she looked energized rather than exhausted. Behind her, Hyun could see crew members moving with purpose, faces focused but not frightened. Captain Hyun, we're going to implement Protocol Carthage on Helix Prime's 3rd moon, Sora said without preamble. The Vreks have established a breeding ground there. It needs to be eliminated. Protocol Carthage? I'm not familiar with that designation. Sora's expression hardened. Total sterilization. We're going to make that moon uninhabitable for the next 10,000 years. Hyun felt ice flood his veins. Admiral, there might be ways to reclaim. No. Sora's voice cut through his objection like a blade. The Vreks don't negotiate, they don't retreat, and they don't stop growing until everything is consumed. You asked for our help. This is what help looks like when it comes from Earth. We don't fight to push enemies back. We fight to eliminate threats permanently. The transmission ended. On his display, Hyun watched as 3 human dreadnoughts moved into position around the moon. Their weapons batteries began to glow with barely contained energy. Then they fired. The moon's surface erupted in flames that could be seen from orbit. 71 hours and 43 minutes after the transmission from Earth, Captain Hyun's sensors began screaming warnings. The hyperspace detection grid lit up like a festival display, registering hundreds of massive energy signatures appearing at the edge of the Helix sector. The Third Fleet had arrived. Hyun stood on his command deck, watching the display with growing disbelief. One by one, the human warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. They emerged in waves, each group positioned with mathematical precision that spoke of incredible coordination and planning. First came the dreadnoughts, massive vessels the size of small cities, bristling with weapons batteries and armor plating thick enough to shrug off anything the coalition could produce. Hyun counted 20 of them, each one capable of leveling a planetary surface. Then the carriers deploying clouds of strike craft that swarmed around the capital ships like insects. Hundreds of small fast attack vessels that moved with aggressive grace through the void. Cruisers, destroyers, frigates, support ships, mobile repair platforms, ammunition haulers, hospital ships equipped with weapons that made them more dangerous than most coalition warships. The fleet kept coming, filling the tactical display with friendly signatures until Hyun had to zoom out 3 times just to see them all. 847 ships. Captain, we're receiving a hail from the flagship, his communications officer announced, voice trembling slightly. Put it through. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of Admiral Sora. She was tall for a human, with black hair pulled back in a severe style that matched her sharp features. She wore a dark uniform decorated with medals and insignia that Hyun didn't recognize. Her eyes swept across his command deck with the practiced assessment of someone who evaluated threats automatically. Captain Hyun, I'm Admiral Sora of the UESN Eternal Vigilance. My fleet is at your disposal. She spoke in perfect coalition standard, though her accent carried the harsh consonants of Earth languages. Please transmit all tactical data, enemy disposition, and strategic assessments. We'll begin combat operations immediately. Immediately? Hyun blinked. Admiral, surely you'll need time to analyze the situation. Coordinate with our forces, develop a battle plan. Captain, we've been analyzing your tactical feeds since the moment we received them 72 hours ago. Sora's expression didn't change. We've run approximately 14,000 combat simulations. We know the enemy's tactics, weapons capabilities, reproduction rate, and behavioral patterns. We've identified 17 critical weaknesses in the Virex formation and 12 opportunities for strategic disruption. We're ready to engage. She said it all in the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. 14,000 simulations in 3 days? Hyun struggled to keep the disbelief out of his voice. Our tactical computers run parallel processing algorithms across quantum networks. We can simulate years of combat scenarios in hours. Sora pulled up a display on her end, and data began streaming across Hyun's console faster than he could read it. This is our battle plan. We'll be executing Phase 1 in approximately 40 minutes. I recommend you pull your remaining ships back to Rally Point Gamma and hold position. You want us to retreat? Admiral, the colony worlds will be defended. Sora's voice carried absolute certainty. Captain, your ships have been in continuous combat for weeks. Your crews are exhausted, your vessels are damaged, and your weapons are depleted. If you stay in the combat zone, you'll either get killed or get in our way. No offense intended, but this is what we do. The transmission ended before Hyun could respond. On another human ship, the UESN Indomitable, Commander Daeho reviewed the tactical display one final time. His vessel was a heavy cruiser, designed for close-range combat and boarding actions. The crew around him moved with practiced efficiency, each person focused on their assigned task. All weapon systems green, the tactical officer reported. Railguns loaded, missile batteries armed, point defense grid active. Marine complement ready for deployment, added the ground forces liaison. Boarding teams 1 through 12 standing by. Daeho nodded, satisfied. This was his 5th major deployment, and the pre-battle routine had become almost meditative. Check the systems, verify the crew, review the plan, then execute with overwhelming force. Simple, clean, effective. Commander, we're receiving tactical assignments from the flagship, his communications officer announced. We're part of Strike Group 7. Our target is the Vrex bioship cluster at coordinates. As the officer rattled off the numbers, Daeho felt the familiar rush of adrenaline starting to build. Finally, after months of patrol duty and training exercises, they had a real mission, a real enemy, a real chance to do what they were built to do. He activated his comm system, speaking to the entire crew. All hands, this is the commander. We're about to engage an enemy that has been terrorizing Coalition space for months. They've killed millions, destroyed dozens of worlds, and pushed back every force sent against them. But they haven't faced us yet. He paused, letting that sink in. The Coalition called us for help because they're desperate. They're scared. They've never seen real war before, not like we have. So we're going to show them what Earth brings to a fight. We're going to show the Vrex why you don't threaten human allies. And we're going to make sure that every enemy watching understands what happens when they make humanity angry. Through the viewports, he could see the rest of Strike Group 7 forming up around them. 12 warships moving into attack formation. Their weapon systems powering up and casting eerie glows across their hulls. All hands to combat stations. Prepare for engagement. In the hangar bay of the carrier Righteous Fury, Lieutenant Bora ran her final pre-flight checks on Reaper 7, her strike craft. The sleek fighter was barely 20 meters long, but packed enough firepower to cripple ships 100 times its size. It responded to her touch like a living thing, systems coming online with smooth precision. "Reaper Squadron, this is Reaper 1, she said into her comm. "Sound off." One by one, her pilots reported in. 12 voices, calm and professional despite the massive battle they were about to enter. Bora had trained with these men and women for 3 years. They were more than her squadron. They were her family. "We've got multiple target zones," she continued, pulling up the tactical overlay on her cockpit display. "The Vrex are massing for another assault on the colony worlds. Our job is to disrupt their formation, destroy their command organisms, and generally make their lives miserable. Intel suggests they communicate through pheromone signals, so aim for the larger specimens. Those are likely the coordinators. Reaper 3 here, boss. Question: are we cleared for nuclear payloads?" Bora checked her weapons authorization. "Affirmative. Fleet Command has authorized full-spectrum warfare. Nukes, kinetics, chemical agents, whatever it takes. The rules of engagement are simple. Kill them all." She heard someone laugh over the comm. It wasn't a nice sound. "Reaper Squadron, you are cleared for launch," the flight controller announced. "Good hunting." The hangar bay doors opened, revealing the vast battlefield beyond. The Vrex swarm was visible even from this distance, a dark cloud that seemed to absorb light itself. Billions of organisms moving with terrifying purpose toward the Coalition defensive line. Bora felt her heartbeat slow, her breathing steady, her mind sharpened to crystal clarity. This was the moment she lived for, the reason she'd spent countless hours in simulation, the purpose behind every drill and every exercise. Time to show the galaxy what a human pilot could do. "Reaper Squadron. This is Reaper 1. Launch, launch, launch." 12 strike craft shot from the carrier bay, accelerating to attack speed in seconds. Behind them, hundreds more fighters launched from other carriers, filling space with humanity's answer to the Vrex threat. The swarm detected the new arrivals and began to shift, billions of organisms turning toward this fresh threat. On 1,000 ships, weapon systems came online, targeting computers locked onto the incoming humans. And across the Third Fleet, on 847 warships, human crews smiled. Finally, a challenge. The Battle of Helix Prime was about to begin. The emergency lights bathed the command deck in red as Captain Hyun gripped the edges of his console. Outside the viewport, another ship exploded in silence. That made 17 vessels lost in the last 4 hours. His fleet, once proud and mighty with 63 warships, now limped through space with barely a dozen functioning cruisers. The Vrex were winning. Captain Hyun watched the tactical display with growing despair. The enemy swarm moved like a living ocean, billions of chitinous bodies flowing through the void. Each Vrex warrior was the size of a ground transport, armored in biological plating that shrugged off energy weapons. They didn't need ships in the traditional sense. They were the ships, propelling themselves through space with chemical jets grown into their bodies. "Captain, the 7th Wing is requesting permission to retreat," his communications officer reported. The young Talarian's feathers were pale with fear. "Granted. All remaining vessels fall back to Rally Point Gamma." Hyun's voice remained steady despite the chaos. A leader couldn't show fear, not when thousands of lives depended on his decisions. But inside, terror clawed at him. The Coalition had never faced anything like this. For 10,000 years, the galaxy had known peace. Wars were fought with economic sanctions and diplomatic maneuvering, not with weapons designed to kill. Most species had evolved on gentle worlds where the greatest threat was weather or scarcity of food. They built societies based on cooperation and shared resources. The Vrex came from somewhere else, somewhere dark and hungry. 3 months ago, they had appeared at the outer rim, Scout ships reported massive biological signatures, then went silent. Defense stations fired warning shots, then distress signals, then nothing at all. The swarm consumed everything in its path, breaking down matter into base components to feed its endless growth. Coalition High Command had mobilized every available ship. They sent their best tacticians, their most advanced technology, their bravest warriors. None of it mattered. The Vrex simply kept coming, adapting to every weapon, learning from every engagement. For every 1,000 they killed, 10,000 more emerged from the breeding worlds behind the front lines. Now, Captain Hyun was leading the survivors of the 5th Defense Wing on a desperate retreat. Behind them, 3 colony worlds awaited evacuation. Millions of civilians who had never known violence, who didn't even have words in their languages for concepts like war crime or genocide. The coalition was losing. Badly. Captain, incoming transmission from Synthesis Prime, Priority Alpha. His communications officer looked up with wide eyes. Priority Alpha meant the High Command itself was calling. Hyun straightened his uniform and accepted the call. The holographic projection showed all 7 members of the Council, their various forms flickering in the blue light. Elder Counselor Vess, a Kelthian whose crystalline body refracted light into rainbow patterns, spoke first. Captain Hyun, your status report has been received. The Council has made a decision regarding our current situation. The Elder's voice carried harmonics that spoke of deep concern. We are authorizing the deployment of alternative assets. Hyun felt his stomach tighten. Alternative assets, Counselor? We are contacting the humans. Silence filled the command deck. Every officer who heard those words stopped what they were doing. The humans. Even speaking the name felt dangerous. Counselor, I must protest, Hyun said carefully. The quarantine protocols were established for good reason. The psychological evaluations, the biological assessments, all the data suggest that bringing humans into coalition space would be catastrophic. Yes, we've read the reports, another counselor interrupted. We've also read the casualty projections if we don't stop the Vrex within the next standard week. The numbers are clear, Captain. We need their help. Hyun had seen the files on Earth. Every coalition officer above a certain rank had access to them, usually with a warning label and a requirement to meet with a counselor afterward. The files detailed a world that shouldn't exist according to any reasonable model of planetary development. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, the highest rating possible. Its gravity was punishing, its weather systems violent, its native life forms aggressive and dangerous. Diseases that would be minor, annoyances on other worlds killed in days on Earth. The planet itself seemed designed to create the ultimate survivors, and it had succeeded. Humans were persistence predators from a world where everything was trying to kill everything else. They had redundant organs, bones that could heal themselves, and a chemical response to danger that made them faster and stronger instead of paralyzed with fear. They could survive injuries that would instantly kill most species. They could eat substances that were literally poisonous to other life forms and call it cuisine. Worse than their biology was their culture. Humans had spent their entire history fighting. They fought the planet, fought the animals, fought diseases, and most terrifying of all, they fought each other. They had weapons that could crack continents, poisons that could sterilize worlds, and the will to use both. By the time they achieved space travel, they had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times over. First contact had been a disaster. The coalition sent a peaceful delegation. The humans greeted them with joy, then casually mentioned their recent small conflict that had only killed 30 million people. Only 30 million. They said it like it was an improvement. The quarantine was established immediately. Humanity was confined to their solar system, allowed to trade but never to leave, never to spread their violence to the peaceful galaxy. It was for everyone's safety, the Council had decided. Now that decision was being reversed. The humans have been contacted through Ambassador Minji. Elder Counselor Vess continued. We requested military assistance. Their response was immediate. A new transmission appeared on the holographic display. A human woman, Ambassador Minji, stood in what appeared to be an office on Earth. Behind her, Hyun could see through a window to the planet below. Cities of metal and light sprawled across the landscape, beautiful and terrifying in their scope. The United Earth Space Navy has been informed of the situation, Minji said. Her voice was calm, professional, but Hyun could see something in her eyes. Excitement? Anticipation? Admiral Sora has authorized the deployment of the Third Fleet. They will arrive at your coordinates in approximately 72 hours. How many ships? Hyun asked, trying to calculate how many human vessels it would take to make a difference. Their technology was impressive, even frightening, but numbers still mattered. Maybe 50 warships, 100 if they were generous? Minji smiled. It wasn't a comforting expression. 847 warships, Captain. The Third Fleet is our rapid response force. If you need more, the Second and Fifth Fleets can be mobilized within the week. The command deck went absolutely silent. 847 ships. The humans were bringing a fleet nearly 15 times larger than the coalition had managed to assemble in 3 months of total mobilization, and they called it a rapid response force, something they could deploy in 3 days. Captain Hyun realized with slowly dawning horror that the galaxy hadn't quarantined the humans for everyone else's protection. They had done it for the humans' protection, to keep the galaxy safe from what would happen if humanity ever had a reason to mobilize for war. Now that reason had arrived. Outside the viewport, another coalition ship exploded, its crew of 200 vaporized in an instant. Hyun watched the expanding debris field and wondered if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The Vreks were coming, but so were the humans. He wasn't sure which terrified him more,